Okay, we're ready to go. This is Non-Duality Talk interviews, and I'm finally interviewing Maya Apollonia Rode. I think we've done actually a couple of interviews, not video.
That's
So
right.
this is the real thing. And Maya's a musician, you're a poet, a writer, an artist, and you're a creative director of Idea Shanti's organization. You've been doing that since 2000. And you have a PhD or a doctorate, PhD from the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. You do workshops, concerts, and exhibits, which express your work as a poet, writer, and artist. And you do guest performances, concerts, workshops, private consultations. Your website is premisespace.com. You want any blanks to fill in on that intro,
Oh, no, that's
Maya?
lovely. I think people know everything they need to know about me now.
Everybody knows you. But the topic we're going to talk about is just a project I've been involved in, which is like running your own non-duality meetup group, like an independent one where there isn't necessarily one teacher, one tradition, one book or anything like that. That's the idea. And so I've been doing interviews with people and collecting materials. And we already talked about this on the radio show once.
Yeah.
Yeah, you called in, and you made some good comments last time. You seemed quite concerned and passionate and all that about some of the points that you made. And I don't know what we want to go to. You mentioned putting together guidelines, and we talked about leadership and so on. I'm glancing down at notes that I have. And you made a great comment here, quoting you. You said, everybody has the Dharma within them, not just the one at the front of the room. And that's kind of a cornerstone viewpoint of all this stuff. I don't know, where do you want
Yeah.
to take off
Well, I guess I'll just say a
from
little
this?
bit about what makes me so interested in your project. And it is around the quote that you just said. I when I first started working for Adyashanti, I knew that, let's say, truth or dharma or whatever word that one wants to put on that was the most important thing in my life, and that's what I wanted to serve. And at the time, it was like, this is the guy that, he's sort of the channel for me to support dharma flowering in the world. And it was never about him specifically. It was more about that expression of, we could say, non-dual truth flowering, and it was the most obvious way for me to support that happening. And then over the years, certainly many people that have been close with him over the years are now teachers themselves or do dharma in their own way, expressing that. And it's like I see them like they're the ones that need some support now to flower in their work. And not only them, but it's like everybody that comes to a satsang is there because of that within them, and to always feel like it's out there with the guy in the front of the room, and Adya in his own way tries to direct people obviously back to their own experience. But just the whole setup of the guy in front of the room or the woman at the front of the room is, just the form of it kind of perpetuates the idea that it's outside of ourselves or that we don't have the ability to express it. And so one of the many sort of facets of what's so beautiful about having the smaller circles is that each person in the circle has an opportunity to start practicing that flow of speaking truth without having to, let's say, sometimes you go to a talk and someone comes up to the microphone and they start playing teacher. And there's something that doesn't feel right about that either, because, well, we're all here to hear the guy in the front of the room, not somebody else's thing. But so if the context is set up for each of us to listen to each other and be curious about each other and to see what is the truth that wants to come through that person now, and how can I hear that beyond the words that they're speaking. There's something that, as each of us flows that, it's like that's the living Dharma, and that's the whole point, I think, of why would Adyashanti or anyone else be in front of the room speaking that, except to cultivate that flow in each person. So that's one of the reasons I'm passionate about, what you're doing and supporting smaller groups to come together.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of been interested in that support mode since like we met at the Science and Non-Duality conferences a few years ago and started talking. I remember you were really interested in that in a different context. I think you're just supporting people seeking some guidance or direction or something. Contact, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me personally, there's the two paths of, doing my own Dharma, expressing through music and poetry and whatever form it happens to go, and then supporting others. Yeah, for sure. And so, for example, the guidelines that the thought of that you would put together some guidelines for people, to me is, it's not about making rules.
Yeah.
It's about helping people that have no idea how to start. There's the people like you that have been around the spiritual block forever and have a certain, let's say, critical mass of non-dual awareness and a critical mass of social skills and, can talk to, just all of that. Like, you come to the table with a lot. So it's like, for you, comparatively easier to start a group than someone who's really new on whichever levels. And so, I love the idea of guidelines that are really non-invasive, but, holding, like this, like having silence on a retreat. It could feel oppressive, or it could feel like, oh, great, I don't have to worry about all, interacting, and I can just be with my process. So how do we have guidelines that support a mutual opening and a mutual appreciation?
You talked about some emails. You used the word container.
Yeah.
Which is a good word. I just need to backtrack, because when you were previously talking about the Dharma, I just want to make sure I'm covering everything. So I took some notes.
Okay.
Some key words there. I want to make sure I'm, letting you elaborate on anything that you need to elaborate on. You mentioned, yes, people need support in flowering. Flowering, that was interesting. Because as you mentioned, as Adyashanti said, he points people back to their own experience. So if you're being pointed back to your own experience, you want to flower in that, or flow. My friend James Travers uses the word flowering and flowing as like the same words, the same meaning.
Yeah.
Essentially. And so this is living your Dharma, as I understand it. Then this flowering, this owning of your own experience, and bringing it to the context that we're talking about, like an independent group. This, from what I understood that you said, that's living the Dharma. Is that right, or is there anything else you want to add to that?
Well, just a little comment about flowering and flow. I realized not too long ago, the word flower is spelled flower.
Flower.
It's really the same thing, I think.
Okay, yeah.
As a word, it's the same concept. But I think that to create a group is a creative act, and part of that flowering for the person who's creating the group. And because I think the nature of the types of groups that we're talking about, then it's also the container for others to come and flower in their own expression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, going back to that word container and guidelines, and you mentioned here, and you've said a little more elaborately in emails to me, that and I could probably, if I can find them, if I can find the what I quoted here, I can probably put down what you wrote about that. You said, oh, you wrote to me, you said guidelines have to do with creating a container that holds and allows experience for everyone. And but that it doesn't have to control that. It's not a controlling thing, the guidelines, more as a framework that you build on and allow freedom. It's more, the guidelines are more for allowing freedom rather than restricting, if I understand you
Yeah,
correctly.
yeah, for sure. The concept that comes to mind, and I'd love to actually get into a dialogue about what are some of those guidelines. I'd love to hear what you've learned and kind of come up with, and maybe talk about that. So anyone, that's listening might be like have some practical thing. But the idea of, let's say, a playground. You have a fence around the sandbox so the kid doesn't run into the street and get run over. It's like he has freedom now, or she has freedom to play without worry because of
Yeah.
the container of the playground. That's kind of how I see it. So it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Or a restrictive thing. And if it does become restrictive, then it's like, oh, okay, they're older now. They know how to cross the street. Then there's other guidelines like, stoplights and things like that. But yeah, certainly as a mandala maker, that's one of my things. There's definitely the form of the circle itself is nature's container, and when we come in a small group, we naturally form a circle. And even that subliminally and energetically, that alone creates a container. So, for example, a guideline that we all probably naturally do anyway is to sit in a circle, right?
Yeah, that's what I
We,
find to be.
we intuitively know that, but if we didn't, and some people might not intuitively know that, I mean, not that you can't be around a square table or something, but it's not like a line of people, like 4 people and 1, that could be
Yeah,
useful for an exercise or something. But generally, a circle, like that's a really basic guideline, I would
it
say.
is.
I'm
It's good to know. Yeah.
I'm really curious, Jerry, what you've come in talking with people. What are some of the things that have come up that are themes in how various people? I think who you've been speaking with are people who have been successfully running small groups. Do you see any themes that are coming up with those?
I really need to. I've done several interviews now, and I've put up a nice web page with all of them. And that's something I really need to do, is to have a section of guidelines and kind of, harvest them all and put them put them in order, or put them in some kind of order, just list them. I think I did that somewhere, and I don't know. And if I had done, I could have, have it in front of me so I don't have to think. I like to have notes in front of me because you tend to forget, but the guidelines
Yeah.
are there. I think almost everyone that started one of these groups that have had them for a few years kind of goes into them. And there's Mark Hovola in Seattle, who's been doing it for about 10 years, as well as David Zinn is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, been having a group for about 10 years, longer than I have, than any of us have. And I think of these guys, and they did beautiful interviews, written interviews, and Mark also did one on audio, and they shared a lot. But I think a lot of it is starting an openness, just the desire to want to meet. So, I mean, the real desire to want to come together, not just something that would be a neat idea, but real
Mm,
desire to do it, a real need almost to do it. And then that's really energizes it. So I think that's the beginning.
that's a great point. You know, that speaks to one of the basic things of, I'm sure you're familiar with Nisargadatta's sort of statement that the two most important things in the, let's say, spiritual unfolding, I don't know what he calls it, sincerity and earnestness. So what you're
Yeah.
talking about just now is sincerity. Like, do you really want to have a group together?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's totally important. And otherwise, it's just some idea that is not really grounded in, you know, the actual movement that life wants to do through you. So yeah, I love that as a guideline. Are
Yeah.
you doing it just because you think you're supposed to? Well, that's not necessarily the way to start. Can you find, if you feel like you want to connect with the part of you that really wants and needs to have this circle, you know, like that's what I might say to someone that's starting. And again, we're talking with a whole spectrum of people, like someone like you who's starting a group might already naturally work that way. Someone who's in a different place in their path and wants to, like, isn't as clear about that sincerity, or what's the difference between something someone told me is good and what I need to actually do, you know, that person, it might be helped by just this simple thing of sincerity. And it brings up to mind something I said earlier, I think, just briefly. To me, a huge element is curiosity, and to come to each other with sincere curiosity and not necessarily like, I know something and I'm guiding you, like, who is the one that da da da. It's more like,
Yeah.
I'm curious about what's your experience of who you are. Like, that would be a right time to say, who are you, you know? Anyway, sorry, I think you want to say
Yeah.
something.
Not necessarily. Yeah. Again, you're pointing to sincerity in that asking who someone is. It's you're asking again with that sincerity. Your curiosity, I think, and it's curiosity for me. It's curiosity to see how a group like this would go. I mean, I've often said that, I've been on the internet since around '98, and I've said before that, I could have gotten out after about 6 months, but because I felt I started a group, a very intense email forum, and it was, I could see the wheels were rolling. It was on its own, and I could have disappeared, but I felt that the only reason I stuck around was out of curiosity to see where it's all going, where all this
Interesting.
non-duality stuff is going. I didn't know. And then, all this stuff happened, conferences and everything.
Yeah.
So a lot of the reason I'm here is just curiosity to see where it's all going. So curiosity is, I think is very important for this.
Yeah.
Real curiosity.
Yeah, real curiosity. Yeah. And so what are some other things? I'm going to try
Well,
to milk it out of you.
no, I think once you have that sincerity and so on to get started, then there's practical things, just like, how are you going to publicize it? I've recommended going to meetup.com because they provide great tools for organization. It's a great source. It does cost some money. Comes out to about $12 a month,
Oh,
but it varies in different countries. In India, it's $2 a month. So it varies by country. I think those are the extremes, $2 and $12. But alternatively, people can even start a group on Facebook. That's free, and
yeah.
that's what Mark Hovala in Seattle just uses Facebook, doesn't use Meetup. I mentioned David Zinn in Cambridge; he uses Meetup. A lot of people use Meetup.com, so I recommend that. It's a practical guideline, and within that, there are other guidelines on perhaps what keywords to use, how to write up your Meetup, how to interact with people that are joining and so on. So there are practical guidelines on how to run a meeting, when to have a break, what to serve at a break, even things as simple as that. Those are
Mm-hmm,
practical
mm-hmm.
things. And again, and something else that's a little less under one's control is the formation of what I call a core group. I think it's really important. A core group's just at least a minimum of two people who share the same vision, the same sincerity, passion, and all that. That's really important to keep a group going, I find. Some people have more than that, have 3, 4, 8 people. We have, several people, and but at least two is good. And there's no guideline to how that'll happen. It just sort of happens, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think that last one you said, I want to just highlight as I agree. It's so important to have, let's say, for a regularity. I don't know what if you have a guideline about, not just having a sporadic meeting now and then, but just to say like, second Monday of every month or whatever regularity that could be really helpful. Certainly with a core group, it's like, it takes two to tango. You can show up and sit by yourself, every Monday night, but that's in reality kind of hard for people to maintain until the group shows up. So if you have at least two people, if you have at least one person that you're going to meet with in that space of Dharma, I like the word Dharma, to do that regularly, then there's something about that habit, and then someone else joins, and someone else comes, and then they go, but to always have that core group, and so that's another thing I just want to underscore for people that are starting a group to, if you do have some people that in your area already, to not just invite them to a group, but first to even ask, is there anyone that wants to do this group with me, like to co-run this group or to co-host or whatever, because to have that partnership is really, really makes a big difference.
And there's a difference, I think, between someone who will be part of your core group, who will co-run it with you, and a regular member. So there are people who attend all the time that don't necessarily want to be involved in the deciding when to meet or what themes or being involved as a moderator or anything like that. But they enjoy coming all the time. So
Yeah.
so that's part of you can even distinguish between a core group that's kind of managerial, administrative, leadership, and a group of the regular attendees who are equally welcome to do whatever they want. If a regular attendee comes to the core group and says, "Hey, I want to be more involved," and then they'd be, chances are they'd be very, most welcome.
Yeah.
But not everyone wants to be part of a core group, so
Yeah, for sure.
it's good to be aware of those differences. If you're running a group, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn. I mean, I think that, you know, you're a little older than me, so you probably have had in your childhood, there was probably more, I'm guessing, more community uh, interaction, neighborhood parties, or whatever thing that might have happened, you know, and that's dissipated over time. And there was not a whole lot of that when I was growing up, and now there's even less. And so we don't really have practice coming together as communities. So even though I think some of these things we're talking about might be really basic, I think that it's important.
That's interesting. You're getting into community. Really, you're talking about. I kind of see them. I haven't really put them together because there are people literally starting communities. Building structures and people coming in and living there. And I'm thinking of David Hodges, who just out of an idea, and he lives in Vermont, and bought some land there and built a big home, like maybe a couple structures, and there's a nice handful of people living there, and it's not easy what they do. They have to do everything, share the work, eat meals together. They have their challenges, and but that's what he's done. That's taking this idea we're talking about and really, blowing it up to a different level. But you're right, it's still even these meetup groups we're talking about still are a community. And occasionally I hear people in our group saying they sense when it's becoming more of an expanded community, and they'll mention it, geez, it's nice coming here. It's like it's like my community, and that's nice to and important to probably mention that these groups can expand toward community.
I wonder, so that's an interesting thing, is what motivates people to do a circle or to join one. Like you said, that there needs to be the genuine desire and need, or however that shows up. But is it a need for, like, a substitute for going to hear the guru speak? Like to just kind of come into that meditation space and like soak in the hit of non-duality or whatever? Or is it, there's also that missing element of community that I think so many people are missing. And there's that element too, but community of people that understand the language that I speak. I came up with a little three sort of definition thing of the Buddha, my heart; Dharma, the language of my heart; and Sangha, where the language of my heart is spoken. And so all those three things come into play in the circle, right? And all those three things, there's a need. We have a need as full human beings for all of those things. So
yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
You're an artist, a poet.
And one of the things I'd like to also just sort of point to is, who is the fellow in Vermont? David?
David Hodges. Yeah.
David Hodges. I have some friends who live in Vermont, and I'm secretly now thinking when I'll go visit them and we'll take a trip to see David and his place.
Yeah.
I've had a vision of doing something similar to what he's doing, I think. So that would be lovely to see how that's going. But one of the things that I see, again, as an important part of the circles that we're talking about is that, and this is part of what I would feel moved to do somehow in a sort of longer term vision, is like, okay, we have all these small groups of people that are sort of popping up in different places around the world. And one of the services and functions that you're doing, Jerry, is that by having sort of like, oh, everyone knows who Jerry is, like, oh, Jerry kind of gave me some guidelines, or I listened to his interviews, and that helped me grow my little thing. And so then the person in, Hungary and the person in Texas, they have a connection through you, and whether they know it or not. And there's something like, I would love to see, all these groups having that virtual connection where they can start sharing. So not only you're starting your little core list of guidelines, but they might share stories of what worked in their circle, or like to really come together to connect these smaller circles so that they feel like they're part of a bigger community of like-hearted, like-minded people. And there's something about that connectivity that I feel is so potentially powerful, and I think inevitable, given technology and whatnot. Inevitably, all these little groups are going to be connected in some way, and whether or not that's thought about right now. But so I think that's one of the reasons why I love that, because it's those core groups that have that the glue of connectivity, and the glue, that community, like true community, is so strong. Like, who wants to leave that? Who's going to forget a true friend, even if they move away? You know, there's that glue of love, maybe even, that it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's sort of the pockets then come together. I'm not quite getting at it, but I
No,
think you're feeling it.
I'm feeling, and what I'm feeling is that's, I mean, I've been involved on the internet groups, and you have that with the online groups. But when you're in person with people, it's really that glue, I think, is a lot thicker, a lot, uh, and the whole intimacy of the group is really much greater when you're meeting in person. I mean, much, much
Yeah.
greater. And when you combine groups around the world, there's if the people in each group are aware of the other groups and some of the people within them, I think it's really can be a great, yeah, that you beautifully described, a great enhancement of a feeling of community.
Yeah.
Really great.
Yeah.
I mean, it hasn't really been done yet. People, I mean, I've mentioned a couple in my group. I think I've only mentioned the group in Oroville, India is the only other group I've mentioned. I don't think people are that aware of these of other groups, and that can be done. It just hasn't really been done yet.
So I'd like to invite you to just start that a little bit right now, like off the top of your head. Where are some cities around the world where you know groups are happening?
Groups, I mentioned David's in Open Awareness Meditation Group in Cambridge, outside, I guess that's outside of Boston. And I mentioned Mark Hovela's in Seattle. And then some of the newer ones are, again, Anamika and DGA Vase in Oroville, India, southern India, have one. And but there's a first meeting is tonight in, maybe it's already happened, I guess it's already happened, in Sydney, Australia. Um, Kim Lai, I think is he pronounced his last name. We had a lot of discussions, and he started a group in Sydney, Australia. And so I'm anxious to hear how his meeting went. His very first meeting, he had like 23 people supposed to attend.
Wow.
So we talked quite a bit of, possibilities of how to organize it and keep it going. But I mean, who knows what actually happened? So what time would it be if it's about, it'd be about 2 in the morning there now. So I guess he already had his meeting. And I guess I'll hear from him soon enough. So there's one in Sydney, Australia, like I said, India, and Gonzalo Fernandez has a group in Costa Rica, and they've had several meetings. Cheryl Abrams started one in it's Woodbridge, Virginia, outside Washington D.C. And she's doing a lot of teleconferencing. Actually, she's chosen to do teleconferencing. So you just call up a number and you're on a conference call, and she's been doing that week to week. And I've sat in on a couple of those conferences. She advertises through Meetup.com as well. Uh, and I'm probably forgetting a couple of others. There are others. Someone just
Yeah.
wrote me from a few other places in the U.S. and I'll have to check my lists. But
That's
there's several.
that that's awesome. Yeah, and I'm sure there's many more that aren't officially, announcing themselves
Right.
anywhere. But what comes to mind, just to mention, uh, some of the cities, I think it's interesting to note the cities that are sort of hot spots for sort of this kind of thing going on. So I want to brainstorm that a little bit with you. The ones that obviously, well, obviously to me, in the San Francisco Bay Area,
Yeah.
that's a place where there's a large amount of people that are interested in this kind of thing. Then other places I think of what's the obvious ones to me are where Adyashanti goes to teach, because there's a critical mass of people in those places. So like Portland and Seattle and Vancouver and Boulder, there's
Yeah.
a big community in Boulder. I mean, I don't know if it's close knit, but there's a lot of people
Yeah.
there. that are interested in this kind of thing. Then in Asheville, is it South Carolina, and where else? Do you know some of the cities around the world where there's kind of a mass
Well,
of people that
yeah, I
are
mean, all those
interested in
you've
this?
mentioned, I think really most notably would be the Netherlands, Amsterdam, and that's in some of these big places. I don't even know if they have these kind of groups that we're talking about, where they're really independent. I don't know if they do. They're all a lot of them are very teacher based. So
Yeah, interesting. And in Australia, like, is it Melbourne or
Melbourne's, yeah, that's where Bob Adamson is at, and so that's he's
right?
he's the center of that community, and I guess there's others. Um, yeah,
Yeah, that's something
where else?
I feel like if I had more hours in the day, I would totally, and maybe I will, start just a listing. So, like on adyashanti.org, there's a gatherings page where people who want to start gathering specifically to, work with Adyashanti's teachings. And there's, I think, like 150 or so listed on there. Um, and that's wonderful. And
Hmm.
it's like, also, I'd love for there to be something much like that, but that wouldn't necessarily just be about Adyashanti's
Yeah,
teachings. And it makes sense that that's how that website needs to present it. But
yeah,
obviously, there's other great teachings and teachers and people who sincerely want to share that circle of Dharma in their. I would love to see something like that. So I don't know. Maybe you and I can talk a little more about that.
hmm,
I need some motivation. I would love somebody who could really help with the technical setup of that sort of thing. I think a couple people getting together
hmm.
to work on that kind of project would be really wonderful for everybody.
Yeah. You're talking about just like your own group locally, or how would it manifest what you just talked about?
Oh, well, I'm just thinking, there's like to set up something online, like a listing
Yeah.
website where, hey, you have a circle. So sort of like
Yeah.
Meetup, but for Dharma circles.
Yeah. 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 I have a web page where I have listed some of the groups, and also
Oh, you do?
these interviews that I'm doing. I haven't really publicized the web page yet, but
Do
it's
you want
at
to publicize it now? Does it have an easy URL?
yeah, it's a nonduality.com backslash meetup.htm. I still use the HTM. I got it when I write up this interview. I'll put the link down. But I'm
Great.
starting to do that. Other hotspots, by the way, I want to mention are like the UK, of course, is a big hotspot for non-dual activity, and Germany too. France as well. Actually, one of these independent meetup groups has started in southern France, but they haven't really got a meetup going yet. But it's on meetup.com, but they haven't really started yet. And that's another one. Um, yeah, there's a few. I really ought to just click into my list here, and because I'm forgetting things. But anyway, uh,
So
so yeah.
is when you post this interview online, is there a place for people to comment? And I'm wondering if we would invite someone to what kind of comment, like, oh, do you have another city where you're starting a group? I mean, even to invite people to sort of raise their hand in the collective space and
Yeah, on my website, and I'm looking at the website now. I don't have a room for comment, but I have a blog, so I can put the this meetup page on my blog, and of course, there's room for comments there. So here's my list of non-duality meetup groups. Yeah, I've got that. Everything I've mentioned here. Don't think I forgot any. There's one in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the Fort Lauderdale Adherents of Non-Duality, Michael Walker. There's one in Fullerton, California, Orange County, the Orange County Non-Duality Meetup Group. Non-Duality Pittsburgh, run by Jim, just has one name, Jim. And yeah, I mentioned the one in France. And one of these groups, it might be the Fort Lauderdale one. I've talked to him. I think it was Michael. He does a lot of, he'll show videos and so on. And I talked to him about, well, why do you have to show videos? And he said, well, this brings up something we've talked about. He said, well, people who are just new to this and just beginning, maybe that's the best way to get people into it, by showing the videos and showing the teacher in front of the room and, the established teachers. That's his thought. He'd like to go to a more independent group, but he says a lot of his people are newer, and he's choosing to introduce non-duality through these videos of well-known teachers. And so that makes sense. But I think this is something we've talked about before, is how do you, when you were on the radio show, how do you bring new people new to the whole teaching of non-duality? How do you bring them into this in the context of these independent non-duality meetup groups?
Yeah, I mean, I love the approach he's taking with the videos. I think that a big part of what I think works about what he's doing, certainly given who he is and what his understanding is that he's holding it as, it's not like these videos are like that we have to follow these people, but it's like these people are good at conveying this. They're better than me at conveying it. I can be present with someone, and I can, there's a naturalness, as with you, just it's like you are who you are, and there's something totally true about whoever you meet with. But when you get someone like Eckhart or Adya or Isaac or whoever it is that's on that video, it's like they're on the video because they're good at it. They're good at talking about it in words. And so that's great for people that are new to it. And so I love using that. It's like it's using the tools that we have available to us, and then after the video's over, then we talk about it. Then we say, what did you get out of that? And the person who's new or whatever, who's not the teacher, they have a chance to express the Dharma that got lit up for them. And that's their moment of expressing. And because we've all listened to the video, we have a context of understanding what each person is saying a little more easily than if they just had to come fresh out of the gate. Then what did they mean by that word? Or like, it's like then it sort of establishes a common language of the night that we can meet in that space. So I'm not against the speaker at the front of the room, particularly because they're good. It's poetry, right? But I'm just sort of, all right, I'm against the idea that it's only up there, right? Or that there's not an opportunity for the listener to also speak or whatever. So, yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, that's great what you just described. I think it's important. And I like the way you described it.
Which part?
The whole section on looking at using videos. I mean, everything you said there, I think was important. That was great.
Yeah, there's also, as we've talked, different types of groups coming together. As there's the people that already have been around the teachings for a while, and they want to come together in community, but they don't need the Buddha to tell them what's so anymore. there's that kind of group, and that kind of dynamic. And then there's the kind where we need to hear the Buddha's voice a little bit
Yeah.
to come together in that space. So
And something else, yeah, and I really like how you're using the term, the understanding of Dharma in your, throughout this, because you have a very, beautiful touch with it when you use it, that I think comes from an understanding of what Dharma is. So it's really, you use that term very effectively.
oh, good.
That's your thing. Yeah, I know Anamika and DGA in Oroville group. They show. I mean, they have a strong independent streak, but they will show videos, maybe 2 or 3 minutes from a couple different teachers. So yeah, I mean, you know it's important. But I like the way you set the context
And
for it.
actually, Jerry, I hadn't thought about, because I'm so used to the Adyashanti gathering concept where they'll watch a video together or whatever, like a whole 2 hour video. That's great to open. Just that's a guideline. I think that's a good guideline for someone who wants a guideline. Just surf YouTube the week before your meeting, find a clip that's 10 minutes or less that you want to share with the group, and
Good.
watch that together
Yeah.
to start the group. And then you have something common to talk about. Like, I think that's a great idea.
I Mark Hovola in Seattle, um, James Travers, who's in my group, and we're equal. We started it together. Um, they both studied with Jean Klein, and Jean Klein apparently urged people to start groups, but he never said to start a Jean Klein group, and he never said,
Oh,
well, back then I guess they didn't have videos to watch. Maybe if it was the days of YouTube, he would, but he just said, just 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 start groups and talk. That's all. I don't think he gave any specific instructions, but I think that's what inspired Mark in Seattle, and I know James has said as much as well. Um, Now,
I love
Adyashanti
knowing
is
that.
how did he give does he give more specific instructions when he says to start a group, or are
You
there
mean
any?
Adyashanti?
Yeah,
Oh, well, he's got this little book, The Way of Liberation, and in the back of that book, he gives like four guidelines that are, yeah, gosh, I don't remember off the top of my head. One of them is probably to speak from your experience. That, yeah, honestly,
yeah.
I don't remember
Well,
what
that's
they
a
are, but
good.
it's a good place for someone to
That's an
start.
essential guideline right there for any of these groups. Speak from your experience.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's something I love, that guideline. It's actually
Yeah,
what Adya's teacher, who invited him to start teaching, that was the instruction she gave him. Speak from your own experience. And I think that there's so much in that guideline that's so helpful. Like it avoids getting into philosophical mind stuff, like arguments about ideas. It's like, what are you experiencing right now, for example?
yeah,
You know, that's what we're here for. And what is your experience of your own process of unfolding, or your own awakening consciousness, or whatever, rather than, well, I think I know about your experience,
yeah.
right? I mean, maybe my experience can inform yours, but I'm curious about your experience, and
Hmm.
I have the knowing of my experience, and I can express that with authority.
That's yeah. It's a great point. What was the other one? Something I like to say in our meetings is that you'll hear all kinds of people talking about all kinds of things, and all kinds of books will be recommended, and you'll read all kinds of stuff, but everyone's responsible for their own awakening, their own experience. Not just speaking from your experience, but you're responsible.
Yeah,
Responsibility is a good guideline, I find.
that's a really good point. And at the same time, I think there's hopefully people that come to these things have sort of a pure intention, pure heart. And I think while we each need to take 100% responsibility for ourselves, there's a sense of I need to also take responsibility for how I'm holding the space for another person, and how and care. Like when there's a circle, especially for a leader of a circle, and maybe we could talk a little bit about even what is leadership of such a circle that we're talking about. But there's a responsibility that we each bring in holding the space for each other, and that feels really relevant and important, to like hold each other with love, to hold each other with respect. Maybe that's another key word, is to really respect each other, because that can get, like, honestly, in the non-duality world, people, when they wake up to that all pervading consciousness, there's a, for some people especially, I mean, there's a deep authority in that. Like, that's seen and it's known. This is it, right? And what happens is that people then apply that same authority, which is real for that. They apply that authority to other things where that authority doesn't apply. Because I have this authority of this, that I know anything about being in a relationship, or that I know anything about what you need to experience. And it can, because it's such a powerful awakening, it can kind of go astray. And so I think the word respect is a good pointer. Like, if you're not respecting the person that you're talking to as just as much of a Buddha as you are, that's a red flag, And so I love the word respect as one of the guidelines.
I love that. It's essential. It's really essential. It's what else does it bring up for me? It brings up something as simple as in the beginning of a meeting, just welcoming people. Sincerely welcoming everyone. And so that tone that you're talking about, it's not a tone. I mean, that, dynamic of relationship that you just talked about. The tone for that can be set in the very beginning, even before you sit down in the circle. Just when people are socializing and gathering, that's an opportunity. And then when you start the meeting, you just welcome people, and the way that's done can basically communicate with what you just said about that.
Yeah, I love that.
That nature of that respect that you're talking about. It's very profound, and it's essential, and you can easily drift from it, get involved in your own sense of authority. That authority that goes too far. When you were talking about that, you must have seen a lot of that in because when you go to these retreats with Adyashanti, you see all kinds of people and all kinds of interactions. I imagine you're just flooded with it.
I've seen that. It's and that happens, I think, well, I don't have to get into the whole story of it, but it's a common thing that happens for people. Yeah.
So how many of Adyashanti retreats have you been on, and how close are you connected with everything that's going on and all the people and whatever?
Well, okay, so I met him at the end of '98. Started volunteering and being very much involved in.
He was sort of just starting then, wasn't he? Or '97?
He started in '96.
'96, okay.
Yeah, so I met him about 2 years later in '99. Then I was fully volunteering and helping him create his first Mount Madonna retreat. And And then I started working for him in 2000. And yeah, gosh, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure I've been on at least 30 retreat, 5 night silent retreats over the years. Yeah, for sure. And at retreats, then I do, usually when I'm on retreat, I'm sort of the poet musician that opens the evening songs with something for the group. And then, I helped him put together a chant that now he does every morning after the first meditation. And so, there's been that aspect of, really playing a role in helping to create the container that he teaches in. And because I've been on so many retreats and also been visible on retreats, then, I meet a lot of people. And I don't get to know a lot of people. I mean, we only can get to know so many people in the amount of time we have in days or whatever. But and they're silent retreats, so we're not talking during the retreat, but afterwards I meet a lot of people. And I for the people that are in my community of people that I interact with regularly or irregularly, it's not just my own experience of encountering people that have a certain, well, just different people that have. I hear a lot of stories about awakening and about relationship with people that are in that process, and so I get exposed to a lot of snippets. And certainly, all the people that talk to Adyashanti during a retreat, I can see, where they're coming from and how he responds to them. And I feel like I have, over the years, gained a lot of snippets, I would say. And then some more in-depth stories that I'm aware of. Yeah. So I don't know if that answered your
Yeah.
question at all.
Yeah, just some insight into your, intimacy with all his work and stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I'll also add, because we're talking about small groups, well, I haven't run a non-duality group myself. I've certainly been in some small spontaneous groups of people that are in the satsang circles. So and before that, when I studied psychology, we had a lot of different sort of group process experiences, and I've been involved in different groups over the years, and I'm aware of the kinds of dynamics that can happen when there's not guidelines, or when there's not clear leadership, or when there's not a good enough container. And so that's why I think I feel so passionate about giving some helpful guidelines, not restrictive, but helpful guidelines that will really help support the flowering of these mini communities, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, giving valuable insights and based on your experience, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what else do we talk about
I don't
now?
know. I have
You're
notes.
the interviewer.
I have to look at my notes, and maybe I'll edit out the portion where my eyes are drifting down, but probably I won't edit it out. Oops. So, I do a lot of interviews. I never use notes. I prefer not to use notes if I could and just talk. But on this type of thing, I have to make sure I'm covering different.
Well, here's the thing,
topics.
Jerry. So, Adya's going to be on Super Soul Sunday. Do you know about that?
No.
Do you know Oprah Winfrey, right?
Yes, I know Oprah.
Yeah.
She's in my room, Oprah. Make me a cup of coffee. Anyway.
So she interviewed him, and he's going to be on her show Super Soul Sunday on Easter. And let me tell you, she uses notes, and she's the queen of interviewing, Jerry. So,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah,
no problem with the note thing if you
there's
want
well, I
them.
find there's different kinds of interviews. Some are just want to get into it, but something about a person, beyond words, and there I don't like to use notes. And then there's something that's more, informational. Like we have to get some information, so I have to have some notes. I want to make sure I cover everything. This is a topic with
So,
different points and information.
may I ask you a question about your series of interviews?
Yeah.
What is your intention for the state? Like, obviously you have a topic, but is there any kind of intention, or what are you hoping to get out of these interviews, or to provide the community through the interviews?
Just to make it feasible and easier for people to start a group. That's all.
Great.
People just want some guidelines, I guess is a word, just to make it available and probably, and maybe I probably haven't stated it, but you mentioned it, and that's to give an opportunity for all these groups to be aware of each other,
Right,
and maybe
right.
somehow that it'll all come together. Although I'm not promoting that or even suggesting it in any way, really, but it'll happen as it happens, if it wants to happen. Um, yeah, like I'm real interested in what's happening with the group in Oroville and the guy in Sydney, Australia, Kim, and Gonzalo there in Costa Rica. We all, I'm really connected with those people, and we're all sort of connected with each other. And the guys in France, they haven't really started yet, but we're all interested in what each other's doing. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that'll, but primarily just to give tools to start a group. It's just something I'm interested in.
yeah, yeah. Hey, Jerry, I realized there was something that I have, unless you know what you want to talk about next with your notes.
No, no, no. I had notes on just some practical things on how we deal with any kind of problems in a group, or I don't know. Um, it's okay. No, yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, actually, I think that how do you deal with problems in a group? That's an important question. I don't know that I have any brilliant responses, except to say, to me, the guidelines exist so that problems don't even
Yeah,
get cultivated. Like, that's an important thing, element of why I'm wanting to have guidelines for people. But have you run into problems?
well, I think that's something that I've discussed or other people have mentioned is when a when a discussion gets conceptual, when it gets away from talking from your own experience, like you were mentioning earlier, when it gets away from that and gets conceptual or gets dealing with more psychological concerns, how what how does that play out? And I think some people just let it play out on its own, and others might jump in and say, well, how does this who is the one who has this concept? Who is the one who has this psychological problem? And try to bring it back on track. So some people would be more active in trying to bring it on track. Others might let it just play out on its own. But it's good to be aware of when things are getting off track. Just to be
Yeah.
aware of it's important.
Well, I think that one of the what you're saying, on track and off track. It's like, what is track?
Yeah,
That there's, to come into a circle. It's like, what's the circle about? For some circles, not what I think you're talking about, some circles come together for the purpose of psychological healing and expression, for example. That's on track, right? And so, to be clear about what is this circle for, and for anyone new to come in to know this is what this circle's about. It's about speaking from your direct experience. It's about this and this, and it's not about this and this. You know, if that's what it is. I mean, each leader then plays a role in what is it that they want to hold what container do they want to have? Are they fluid enough or even want to contain, to leave enough space for someone to have their psychological process? Or do they know, you know what, that's not my forte, I can't really hold that kind of space. That's not really what this group needs to be. I mean, people need to deal with their psychology. To say that's not spiritual or like to somehow judge it in any way, that's not true either. But to say, you know, that's not what we're really set up in this group to do, then that would be a way to, you know, help contain the process. But I think the word track, I mean, that means something, and if it's an unconscious meaning, then I don't know if that's super helpful. But if it's conscious, then we can all know and we come together with an agreement that this is what we're doing or not doing. And I agree. I mean, I think the thing in both of those cases where there gets to be like some kind of mental dialogue about something that kind of is removed from direct experience of reality and is just like talking about reality, or someone who's in a psychological process that takes up a lot of time, you know, processing something. Like both of those things are kind of where there's a domination of the space, and like a taking over of the collective energy. And maybe that's, like I don't have an answer for that, but I'm just pointing out that there's an element of self-awareness that if the individuals coming into the group that we need to cultivate in ourselves and in the people in the group, to be self-aware of what am I contributing to the group, and what is the collective field in the group, what does it need, or you know, what is it holding right now. Yeah, I don't know, it's I guess I'm just saying a lot of words, but really just thinking that that's an important consideration. It's an important thing for a group leader to, you know, be aware of.
Yeah, something that came to mind is something that I'm looking at my page of interviews here. Let me get to it, because David Zinn, again, said something, been running a group for 10 years, and said something about the importance of describing what your group is about. You know, writing a statement that makes clear, what's your group about? I just want to read it, see if I can find it here.
Oh, that would be terrific.
He wrote a beautiful, I put out a questionnaire and he wrote a beautiful responses to it. No, I probably won't be able to find it.
You know, Jerry, what would be awesome on your page or whatever is not only to collect guidelines, but to collect versions of those statements.
Yeah, like excerpts.
That would be really great.
From it. But he made an important point of how important it is to describe your group in the right way. I can't find it here.
And that reminds me of a friend of mine in Boulder who I never followed up, but she talked about what a great group that they have that comes together regularly. And she started it by sending out a letter to people that she knew, inviting them to be part of this group that she's starting. And there was something about it that it felt like, what did she say in her letter that's not unrelated to what you couldn't find just now, but it's like even a letter of invitation. What does that look like? How is that written in such a way that conveys that naturally draws in the people that are a good match for the group, and naturally people that aren't a good match wouldn't come. Um, I'm looking, I really encourage you to have that fellow's guideline, or that the group description, and other descriptions that might be slightly different, and each leader might be drawn to a slightly different facet of the whole thing.
Something else you pointed to was that each person that attends these meetings could have a statement of why they're there,
That's
or,
great
or even
too.
even of what the group is about for them. Because then you alluded to that in your response to you know
I Yeah, I might have alluded to it,
to
but I
that.
wasn't thinking it, and I think that's
No, that's what came
great.
out. Yeah. So again, starting these groups, really important to describe it in the right way. And yeah, and something I've never done or even thought of was, suggest that people, your attendees write down their own purpose and for being there. And it's sometimes if you at one of these meetings, if you have 15 people, it would be nice to ask everyone why they're there and what they want to get out of it. And that would take up a couple of hours. But if you have a small meeting of 4 or 5 people, you can do that. People can each spend, a few minutes talking about why they're there, how they got there, and those make for some pretty good meetings. I think,
That's a terrific idea. So here's the thought that comes. Depending on how many people are in your group and at what stage it is, you could say each meeting we have two or three, or however, what's the right number, people talk about why they're here.
yeah,
And then so
that's a
if
good
it's
idea.
15, three people talk, and then we do the normal thing the rest of the time. If
That's
it's
a good
four
idea.
people,
I've never heard of that, and I find that once you start getting your meetings going, you'll find most people are regulars, and you'll get 1 or 2 or 3 new people each time. So um, at some point, you can just invite the new people to say why they're there and to spend 5 minutes talking to
yeah.
them. And yeah, we don't do that. We need to. It's a good reminder to me to do that because it's interesting to find out about people,
Oh
and new
yeah.
people.
And yeah, I love that. Like maybe for someone who's new, once they're like maybe the second or third time that they come, hey, you've come
Yeah,
back.
yeah, that's true.
What is
Maybe the
it that
second or
you're,
third time. Yeah.
yeah.
But I was thinking of Kim starting his group in Sydney with 20 brand new people. Like you want to get to know everybody, but you don't have the time. So maybe just during socialization moments or during a break, you can find out about people. But when you're first starting out, you're going to need to, have a few meetings and start getting to know people. Maybe get some phone numbers and meet people afterward. Meet 1 or 2 people for coffee. Just start getting to know people.
That's a good point. So that brings us to that thing about the leadership role in the group. Even if you're thinking you want to start a leaderless group, you don't want to be the teacher, you don't want to dominate the circle, but still the fact that you're bringing it together makes you a leader. And so what is
Yeah.
that role? And I love that. Are you
Mhm.
drawn to have coffee with the people that show up outside of the meeting?
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Yeah, and that's important. And that happens. I mean, just as a result of talking to people, it's natural. If you're getting along with someone, you're striking a rapport. It's just natural to say, hey, let's meet. Let's talk about this some more, and that'll happen. So you have to be somewhat of a social person and have some leadership qualities and be able to manage your group and organize it. Uh, yeah, and, and,
Yeah.
and and now Kim again in Sydney started out planning his meeting at a mall, just as some tables at a mall. And he thought maybe 7 or 8 people to show up. And when he had so many people sign up, he had to find a place to rent, which he did. A very nice space. So you have to be kind of nimble too. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I want to go back to underscore what you had said before about welcoming. Like as a leader, you're creating a space, and you're creating, like, you're selecting the environment, and maybe tending the environment in some way or preparing it in some way if it's in your home. And you're welcoming people into the space. And that's one of those things that is more important than it seems on the surface. But it really sets the tone. It really sets the tone. And that's huge. It's really huge.
Does idea do that? I mean, is there or is that done wordlessly in some way, or
Do you mean
like a
in his
welcoming of just
retreats?
people? I guess I don't know. I don't know. Tell me about it. I don't know.
Well, I don't think there's a guideline. I mean, the Way of Liberation, the little section at the end, I don't think there's a guideline about welcoming or anything, but I would say that there's a great deal of energy um, that goes into creating the container of silence on his retreats. And that's the container that's
Yeah.
cultivated. And within the silence, it's like, and then silence is understood to be the greatest teacher and the greatest teaching. So there's a lot, there's a long orientation at the beginning of the retreat so that people can maintain silence during the retreat and give themselves and each other that silence. And not to say that silence has to be, is the ultimate retreat container, but that's the one that he uses, and it's a very powerful one.
Okay,
And
I can see that.
so, in terms of welcoming, I think welcoming happens sort of by nature. I'm not sure how it is that the people who volunteer to help make the retreat happen, including the people that volunteer at the registration table, there's a welcoming, like these people are there because they love the space of retreat, and they know the value of it, and they want to support it. And so that love of what we're doing together kind of feeling, like someone that walks into that retreat space and is there welcomed by the person that's doing the registration, there's that natural welcoming that happens
Hmm.
because people are serving out of their own gratitude and joy of what we're doing together. So I think that happens that way. I mean,
Yeah.
the specific welcoming.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that makes sense. The whole thing is permeated with welcome. Space is welcoming itself. I can see that as you're talking about it.
Yeah.
So to actually welcome the people and say, well, I want to welcome you all here. I want to. That might come across as a little wooden and a little just
Oh,
unnecessary,
right.
maybe redundant or unnecessary
Well,
or
he
artificial. Maybe I don't
probably,
know. I don't know. I can see where that might be the case. If everything is already obviously welcoming, there may be no need to say it.
yeah, I didn't think about it that literally, but he probably does at
And
the
then again, he
beginning.
probably
Like,
does. What do I know? I've never been to any of them.
he, at the beginning, like during his first talk, I'm sure he says something
Probably
welcoming.
does.
Like, that's just
Anyway,
so,
but I think we made the point about welcoming, so people can think about it, or.
yeah, for sure. I'll say one more thing about welcoming
Yeah.
because it's that important. So, a friend of mine, she was really good at throwing parties, and I was curious because I like to have good containers, and every once in a while have a party. What makes that work well? And she said, well, my mother-in-law taught me. So one of the first things she said about throwing a party is she said, when the doorbell rings, you go and you answer the door and you make every guest feel welcomed.
Ah, there.
And that was her key to throwing a good party.
Ah,
It's that important.
I think that's what I'm saying
Yeah, yeah. So you're a
in
natural,
a way.
Jerry.
I think that I'm going to remember that because I think that's important.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just sit in our group. The people that get there early sit there, then other people wander in, and hopefully everyone feels welcome when they walk in. But I think that's something I'm going to remember, and that's a guideline right there. When one of your guests walks in, welcome them again sincerely, and make them really feel welcome. That's a good guideline. That's we were able to boil all that down at least to one practical
Yeah.
guideline. Yeah,
And welcoming can happen in different ways. What's your style? I'm a hugger.
yeah,
And so that's how I might welcome someone. But then again, if it's set up that, we're going to come together in silence and just walk in quietly and join the meditation, then welcoming doesn't look like let me get up every time and hug somebody,
yeah,
right? So it's just like it's just the spontaneous, just the intention of welcoming, and then maybe when the circle does open for speaking, then you welcome. Oh, you're new. Hi, what's your name? Or like,
yeah,
there's different ways just to be authentic about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Very
Yeah.
good. That's some nice practical stuff there.
Great. And you're keeping your list of guidelines, right, Jerry? You're
I
writing
got it.
them.
I have them. I got to like pull them together.
Okay. So, the other
Yeah.
thing I want to bring in is the sense uh, of good questions. So this is something I've been working on recently. I'm going to do a little presentation at a small conference that's coming up. If people aren't aware of it, actually, I'll put a little plug in for the Center for Non-Dual Awareness,
Oh yeah, I'm
which
aware of it.
is run by Adam Chacksfield uh, and others. And it's a group for people who, and I'm using the word Dharma, or people who share non-dual teachings or Dharma in whatever way. It could be that they're teachers, or could be that they just share it over tea with people, or just intend to, or whatever. It's an organization for such people to kind of be together and talk to
Mhm.
each other and share ideas or whatever. So they're having a retreat in Portland.
Oops, we froze up here. Can you hear me?
Frozen on my Skype. I'm wondering if
Okay, I
this is
think we're
still
back.
recording. Okay, are we back?
Still recording. I think that I don't know if I can edit that out, so just a few seconds.
Okay, okay. So anyway, at this one of the projects I'm working on for that presentation is a list of questions that are good for people to have real conversations. I think it's a really common experience for people when, let's just say, when they wake up, it's like the types of conversations and relationships that they were used to having just don't mean anything to them anymore. They can't collude in the dramas of life in the same way that they used to, and the types of conversations that the people in their lives are used to having with them completely don't make sense anymore. And so one of the ways that I feel like we can bridge, we all want authentic communication. Like that's the issue. It's like when you're talking with someone and they're going off on some story and you can't connect with them. So I'm collecting questions that are good questions that you can use with people that aren't necessarily on a spiritual path, but here you're talking with them. It's your mom or whoever. You still want to connect with someone, but you don't feel like you have to convert them to non-duality, but there's still a desire to connect. So I think questions can be so powerful. An example of such a question this might be my very favorite question, is what's been on your mind or in your heart recently, and why is it important to you? Like, I think that's a great question that works for anyone, and they can come and access something that's important to them and it kind of hopefully sidesteps the drama thing, but it's a little door into connecting with people. So I think in a similar way with these groups, it's like the question of the day, you know. Like one question of the day could be, what was your first experience of a shift in consciousness? And maybe a few people talk about that, answer that question. That's interesting. I think we all there. I think that maybe it's just me, but it seems like there's a curiosity about each other's unfolding, and how is consciousness flowering there, and how did that start? Do you have any favorite questions that you ask people?
I don't think so. Uh,
It just spontaneously comes in the moment,
Favorite
probably.
questions. Yeah, I can't think of any favorite questions. I mean, that would happen like in our group, or even if I'm doing interviews. Um, I don't know.
Okay, well, can I offer you some questions, or
Definitely, yeah.
offer
I guess I should have them.
people, I mean, not you,
You
but
know,
offer, just because I'm working on this list, and I was thinking about which questions would be relevant, not necessarily, not to ask my dad, but to ask of people that are in like a circle, like what we're talking about. What one I like is about, it speaks to living what you've realized, right? Like that's something that we face after there's a shift in consciousness. Okay, how does this actually move in the world with integrity and that sort of thing? So a question I like about that is, how do you find the strength to do what you know in your heart is right? I think that I would love to hear people's answers to that question.
yeah.
Another one is, think of someone who touched you deeply or made a big difference in your life, and share a story about your experience with them. Or what's the best piece of advice or teaching that anyone has ever given you? What would you say was the most profound moment in the story of your spiritual unfolding? Here's one that I learned recently from a woman who talks about mutual awakening. Patricia Albert is her name. What are you experiencing right now? She had us do these dyads where we would just talk to the other person and say what we were experiencing right now, and then we got into groups of four and we spoke, what are we experiencing right now? And it was a profound coming into the bigger space together. um, Even a simple thing like, what's your favorite quote?
Hmm.
What's your favorite spiritual teaching quote? Like, that would be fun, I think, in a group like that. What confuses you? What is your process of tapping into your intuition or inner wisdom? Describe a time in the past when you were confused and what you understand now that you didn't know then. Or tell a story about how a shift in your consciousness or perspective has impacted someone in your life. Or what was the most defining moment for you in the past week or so? Anyway, these kinds of questions, I think, like, I love to hear the answers to those questions. And so that's part of it for me, which goes back to the sincerity and the curiosity. Um, so that's the thing. I think if these questions are interesting to you, then ask. If they're not, then don't. But I think
Hmm.
it's the question is such a powerful thing.
Yeah, no, what you just laid out there is a great contribution to all this, I think, and just the idea of thinking of good questions is important. And any one of those questions could be the theme for an entire, meeting or several meetings.
Yeah, for sure. Like the favorite quote one, that could go quick if everyone just says their favorite quote, but
Yeah,
then each quote, like why is that their favorite quote? Because there's so much depth of meaning in it, and then
hmm.
you get into a conversation about that.
You can go on and on.
Yeah. I mean, that could be another guideline even. We talked about starting each meeting potentially, if you want to do it that way, with a short YouTube video that becomes the seed of some conversation, or each week invite a different person of the group to bring in their favorite quote,
Yeah,
and then that's the seed of the meeting.
yeah, yeah. It's great ideas. Yeah,
So I get that. I tend to like to have the container, and that other people, another leadership style might be to have it be more open and fluid. And so I'm curious, because that seems more like how you've been approaching it also, because of the
hmm,
critical mass I know that you have in yourself and in the group that you're bringing.
hmm.
There's not that same kind of container needed. But I'm curious, how does that more fluid thing unfold? Like what kinds of things do you guys end up talking about?
Uh, well, we always have a theme. Each meeting has some kind of a theme. The theme is almost an excuse to
Okay.
just get together. Because there's really only, I think there's only the one thing that we talk about. Um, what's true, what's truth. Um, are you speaking from in the most bottom line way? Are you coming at things or approaching things in the most fundamental way? Um, yeah, I think that, but I think that beyond the talk and beyond the words, it's what's really important is kind of the feeling of presence in these groups. It's like the silent retreat is kind of like going on alongside the uh, the retreat, and I mean the spoken part of the meeting, and it's like that presence is always there, and that's what the meeting's about. So it's not so much what we talk about, but it's what's beyond that, and I like to point that out in the meetings. And something that's I find is important um, is sitting in silence in order to recognize and feel and know that simple beingness. That's really the teaching. It's like I guess you were saying about Idea Shanti. The silence is the teaching. So that's what the meetings are. Really, I guess any of them would be about.
Yeah, I'm so glad you
So
said that. Yeah, right.
the
So it's
silence, yeah,
and silence, that's sort of a practical word for it, but it's that, like, what is it that we're all devoted to, that unspeakable mystery of being and not being, and like that's what we're really doing. And I love that. Yeah, the words are an
yeah,
excuse. It's like the words are like, you know if all if all communication is this, the words are like this little part of it. I don't know if you could see my hands,
yeah. I
like,
could, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm just thinking that even not just the words, but even the actions and the doing. Like I'm doing,
yeah,
whether it's this interview or all the work you do. You can work, 20 hours a day, and it's all a small thing in a way, a really small thing.
yeah, yeah. I'm so glad you brought it back to, like, just what are we really
So
doing
that's,
here?
yeah. So that's kind of like the cornerstone of community too. Going back to the bigger community, like David Hodges' Vermont community. I think again, it's that presence, beingness, the silence, the wordless knowing.
Yeah,
That's at the base
yeah.
base of all
And
this.
I love what just happened here in our conversation because it's what you just said, that in your groups you like to bring it back to that. You like to remind people this is what we're here for. And so in this interview, that's what you've just done. It's like this is an example of,
Yeah,
just speaking it, and I'm like, oh yeah, right. And then the space opens up, and that's the beauty that we're really here about, right? and
hmm.
and we can do the accounting, and we can do this and this and this, and that's all in service of life itself living. And then and then to really bring it back to this, how beautiful, and this is what is the true calling that brings us together in such a, what does non-duality group mean? It's
Hmm.
like those are words, but this is the reality of it. And yeah, so, and there's the fluidity of, you dance and you play, and you have the fence around the playground, and then
Yeah,
whatever it is, this is what it's about. And so then that brings the obvious guideline, which I would say would be to have some silence during your group. Maybe start with
yeah,
silence. Like, not everybody is into silence as the way, but if there's not a critical mass of sort of, I'll call it awareness in the group, silence is really important, I think. You know?
yeah. And it can just be a few minutes. Doesn't have to be like,
Yeah.
45 minutes. It can be 5 minutes of silence. We like to have a silence at the beginning, one at the end. One at the end could be just for like a minute or 2 minutes before everyone leaves, and before we go to a break, when you come back from a break, or just we've started to use a talking stick. So a talking stick, you can grab the talking stick and you can be silent. Just you don't have to say anything. So takes us to a talking stick as a guideline, a device, a mechanism.
I love that, and that
You know,
particular even reason, just to have the talking stick be a symbol of listening to someone in silence. Like, that's
hmm,
worth it for the whole talking stick thing to me. Even if just to open up the possibility of someone just being present and having the attention of the group in
yeah.
silence. Oh my God, that's beautiful.
The group in Oroville, they use the talking stick, especially at the end. They pass it around so everyone has a chance to say something, or again, they can hold it for a minute in silence, or they can just pass and just not say anything and hand the stick to the person next to them. And I'd like to start, doing that because that gives everyone a chance to say something, to have the floor, even if it's for a few seconds. That's a good idea. It's a good little guideline.
Yeah, yeah, and even if they don't say anything, because that
Yeah.
includes all ways of being with the group. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, there are people that come to our meetup that really don't care to say anything, but they certainly contribute by their presence because they come a lot, they come often, and they're there for a reason,
yeah, yeah,
and that says something. That's a
yeah.
contribution, just showing up is contributing to these things. Well, how are you doing with time? I think you need to get going.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm gonna have to get going
okay,
soon.
we covered a
So,
lot. I think you contributed a lot of new things that I haven't heard from the other interviews. So uh, I'm gonna write up a lot of what we're talking about here. Actually, put it
oh,
into print so
great.
people don't have to, watch everything. But I think people will. I think everyone will watch it all to
Someday,
see what we're
everyone on the
doing.
planet will have seen this video.
Yes. Anyway, so thanks, Maya. That's was great, and Thank you very much. I think what I'll do is, we can sign off and then I can turn off the recording and
Oh, okay.
we
Yeah,
can say
well,
some final
Jerry,
words.
oh, I forgot to say the most important thing. You know
Yes.
what I'm going to say, don't you?
I
I
don't
love
know.
you, Jerry.
Oh, I love you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always fun to talk with you. So thanks for.
You're still going to Sand. You're going next year,
Yeah,
this
it's
coming
like
October.
15 minutes from my
Oh boy, that's
house.
right. It's near your house.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not. Yeah, no, I don't think I'm going this year, but you never know.
So are we
Never
still
know what'll
being
happen.
recorded?
We are.
Oh,
But
okay.
let's say goodbye, and then I'll just turn the recording off first.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thanks for
Thank you. Thanks very much,
watching.
Maya. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. Bye. Love you. Yeah, that recording's off now.
Okay. That was so fun.
So I think that was really, yeah, I think that was really good. And now I'm checking the recording things. Now that it stopped recording, I hope it
Oh,
recorded
okay.
okay. But I also have an audio version of it. That's definitely going. That's working.
Okay.
Um, yeah, a lot of really good stuff that again, no one came near really covering. Even the guys who have had groups for 10 years. So a lot of good
Mm.
contributions. Yeah, when I do what I do tracks. So I'll say from 1.5 minutes to 4 minutes, we talked about such and such thing, and then I
Oh,
might quote you
great.
there or put a link so people can go through and see what the interviews are all about. So yeah, that'll be in writing. This will be a very
That,
good addition to my webpage, and yeah.
yeah, that's awesome, Jerry.
So I'm gonna, yeah, good. No, thanks. I'll probably try to put it up by tonight sometime. Get it up, and
Well, you're so good. Retirement is nice.
I'm semi-retired. I mean, I work where I live. I
Oh, you
work one
work.
day. I work where I live. I'm a live-in support worker
Oh, I
for
see.
people who have been diagnosed with mental illness.
Oh
So
my
so my
gosh.
job basically is just to live here, and I just really just have to be here between like 11 p.m. and 7 or 8 a.m. It's the only time I really have to be here. But I
Wow.
live here, so I'm here all day, and in return I get a lot of you know all my expenses paid, and then I have other incomes anyway, so I live pretty comfortably. But
That's
it's not
awesome.
a lifestyle for everyone.
Yeah.
But I've been here for doing this for 12 years. I suits my lifestyle, my personality.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
That's
That's
what I
nice.
do.
And so are you going to be a stand?
I don't think I'm gonna go this year. I kind of
You gave up on it.
I don't know if I gave up
You
on
were
it.
sand.
I were, yeah, yeah. I had to help with the first one, yeah, and yeah. I don't know. It's just not. That just hasn't happened for me the last couple of years for whatever reason.
You don't know why?
No,
You
I mean
can
I
tell
would
me.
like to really hang out with the people there. I'm not so big on all the talks and all, and they put me to work there. I got to work, which sometimes it's fun. It was fun working there, but I don't know. It's just kind of gone by me. I'm finding I'm doing less. I really just want to focus on a few things. Just
Well, I'm glad you were there
you know,
long enough for me to bond with you and to
yeah, we
have
had good time.
such.
I had great times. Those times we spent together were great. Those were we were there in the early days, and that was you can't recapture those days because it was
Yeah.
new.
Yeah.
So it's good we were part of all that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad that you didn't disappear from my universe just because you're not going to that
No,
thing.
I find I'm cutting back on stuff. I want to do my radio show and work on this project with groups,
Yeah.
and that's it. I put out my newsletter, and that's about it.
Are you in touch with Rick?
Rick
Buddha.
Archer, or
Yeah, Archer.
not really. Yeah, we are. We communicate a little. We have a little edgy kind of relationship,
Oh, what
actually.
does that mean?
I don't know. I think
Are you in
we annoy
competition?
each other a little bit. I don't think it's.
Why?
I don't know. We do. I've said things about him, and he's he's gotten back to me and about it, and
What
I
is
mean,
your meaning?
I've teased him. I've teased him, I think.
You've teased him in public on your website?
On interviews, yeah.
That you interviewed him?
No, I've interviewed him just with people.
That's
I've
mean.
interviewed a lot of people, and they would mention him, and I might say something about him.
You're
Nothing negative.
mean.
No, no, nothing negative. I think that maybe I don't know.
What did you say that
What
bothered
did I
him?
say about him? I was interviewing someone, and I said he mentioned Rick Archer, and I said, well, Rick does a lot of the big people. He doesn't do any of the little people. And
Oh,
Rick wrote me back, and he said, I do. He said I interview a lot of unknown people. So
okay,
I checked
yeah,
on it, and I guess he does. So
I
I
see.
apologize to him, blah blah, and
Yeah.
but
I like
there's
Rick.
still a
I
little
like both
edge.
of
Oh, I
you.
like him. When one year Maurizio asked me to moderate a panel, I really didn't want to do it. I said, you should, ask Rick Archer. He's really good. And I didn't know who Rick was at that time, so he didn't use Rick. But the year later, he used Rick once he learned who he was.
Yeah,
So I
Rick
mean,
was good.
I've recommended Rick to do panels. I know he'd be good at it.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't like doing panels that much.
Do you think no, be totally honest. Do you think I would be good at moderating a panel?
I don't know. I find it a lot different than doing an interview with one person. It's like
Okay.
you got three people and you got to interview them. I really never felt I caught on to it. I
Okay.
never felt I really got it or caught on to it at all. And I really don't know how you do. I think you have to be very prepared.
Okay.
I don't know. It's not something I
Okay.
really am looking for. Not something I really I feel I need to do. Now, on the radio, I could actually have three or so people. I seem to be do okay with that, but I don't
Mm.
see that as a panel discussion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, let me tell you,
I don't
last
know.
time the panel was there were two really lame panels. Like people were talking like I just woke up yesterday and I'm going to say, well, who's the one saying your point right now? I mean, it was
Oh, really?
ridiculous. Like the dialogues that were like not even dialogues, they were stupid. I woke up yesterday
Oh,
conversations by like who were it was like Rupert and Almas.
well, that's pretty powerful guys.
I know. And I'm like, come on,
And was someone
people.
up? Was someone moderating that, or was just those two, or someone was moderating it, or
I think Zaya was the unfortunate one who was moderating that. And
I think it's really hard.
yeah, and it was interesting because a friend of mine afterwards, she thought, "Oh, I thought that was really interesting." And I was like, "Okay, so everyone has a different perspective on this, but I just found it completely annoying."
If I think my one of my first panels I did was okay because I've invited all the people. I had specific questions. Um, if you invite your own people and you know where you want to go with it, that's a good way to that's a good way to go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've done a couple of panels where I've just been too vague, and I've trusted the panelists too much to create a flow. They weren't saying anything, or I thought the audience would ask great questions, and I didn't take the responsibility, really.
Yeah,
I
that's
really didn't.
interesting.
I think I dropped the ball on a couple of them.
Well, I might propose a panel.
So if you're
And
gonna,
if I do, I'll ask you for
yeah, if
advice.
you're gonna do it, make sure you're really prepared, get a lot of questions, which obviously you're good at. Keep the ball rolling, and yeah, it's
Yeah,
not something I've definitely didn't haven't perfected, but try it if you have the opportunity. By all means, dive
yeah,
into it.
yeah. Well, Jerry, I'm pushing the
Okay, you gotta
limit on
go.
my being late for work,
Oh
so
my God, don't go to work. Okay, thank you, sweetheart.
I've just enjoyed it too much. I can't
Yeah,
hang
I
up. I
know.
hate hanging up.
All right, we gotta go. We'll talk again. I'm gonna check this. I hope this all came out. I have this little always have an anxiety. Like
I
I have two
know.
recordings, so we'll be okay.
Okay.
Anyway,
All
bye.
right. Well,
Have a good
wonderful to
day.
see you, Jerry.
Yeah, good to see you. You're
Thank,
beautiful.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.